BBC Sounds, music, radio, podcasts.
I listen to this music and it gives me this feeling that it's so hard to describe in words. I love the groove, I love the drums, and I love the bass.
For me, drum and bass has always felt like home.
We just noticed that the break beats had a different dynamic on the dance floor.
It can be melodic, it can be aggressive, it can be mellow.
Nights out, workouts, festivals, friends, fields.
You need to be like in a club or a festival to fully appreciate it.
The feel of the beats driving through your feet. Bassline that can't help but make you move.
People talk about punk rock, but the rave scene in its early days was the biggest youth culture movement in living memory.
The momentous moments of your life soundtracked, whether you know it or not, by a movement that started in the UK more than 30 years ago.
There was a real feeling of oppression. Music was always my escape.
You don't understand what jungle means to me. It literally saved my life.
It's an underground movement that's won Mercury Music Prizes.
They were up against Spice World. When they were reading out, I was like, there's no way Ronnie's going to win it.
UK number ones.
No one really expected a drum and bass track was going to get to number one.
And sold out Wembley Arena.
Make some noise for Andy C!
When Andy did his first sellout show at Wembley, drum and bass sold out Wembley Arena. That's like quite a statement.
And even now, its influence is all over the British music scene.
It was us that started that. We was at the back going, yo, pull up that, yo, rewind, pull up.
It's the sound of cultures, scenes and energies melting together, spilling into the mainstream and leaving us jumping as one, euphoric, timeless and utterly breathless.
It's groundbreaking, it's life-changing, it's life-affirming.
This is the story of how drum and bass redefined the sound of Britain, as told by the legends who created it and the music lovers who witnessed it. I'm DJ Flight and this is Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass. Hit subscribe now to get the latest episodes when they drop.
BBC Sounds, music, radio, podcasts.
Drum and bass is everywhere. The fast beating heart of your workouts, the pure release of your nights out. And it's still breaking new ground. This is the story of how it rose and rose. I'm DJ Flight, and you're listening to Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass. Episode 1, The Birth. D&B is woven into the fabric of the current music world, but to find out how it became so influential, we have to go back. As the 80s flipped into the 90s, a powerful movement was growing, informed by social, cultural and political upheaval. Poverty, racial oppression, war, and the fall of European communism was soundtracked by a dynamic new incarnation of dance music, rave. Fabio, along with his DJ partner Groove Rider, is a dance music icon. He was there right at the start when house and techno exploded in the UK in '87.
There was just a real feeling of unease. The police hate us, the government hate us. I'm black, everybody hates us. At the same time, man, music was always my get out. It was always my escape.
Some of the biggest promotions were birthed in fields, warehouses, even airport hangars, and they attracted thousands of people looking to party. The rave scene united people from all walks of life. Black, white, queer, straight, rude boys and girls, new age travellers, football hooligans. Everyone came together. Coventry-raised DJ Doc Scott, aka Nasty Habits, produced genre-defining tracks and runs his own label, 31 Records. He remembers the beginning when things were kicking off.
These people that were rivals and used to fight each other every other weekend or, twice a year at a football game, all of a sudden were putting on parties together. It was like a crazy transformation, and then it's like, oh, let's not fight anymore. Let's put on a rave, make a load of money and have a good time.
Despite most raves going ahead successfully and peacefully, things weren't always plain sailing. The government and police frequently clamped down on revellers.
The Pay Party unit, which is made up of officers from across the region, has built up detailed knowledge of the main organisers, where and how they advertise their parties. Officers will also pose as partygoers to get the details they need.
Hello, mate. You got any raves on this weekend? I'm coming up from Essex.
But once you light a spark...
When I first met Kemi, she said, yeah, I've been doing this thing called raving. And I was like, oh, electronic music, I don't know. But she just kept bombarding me with like pirate radio stations. And she just kind of injected me with a poison, really. And that poison I started to fall in love with.
Injected with a poison.
That was DJ Storm. She features a lot in this story. The Kemi she mentions is DJ Chemistry. These two women from Northamptonshire would go on to become the ultimate DJ duo and help the spark of drum and bass become a fire. Carl Loban, editor of DJ Mag.
The rave scene was just so tremendously exciting. It was so fresh. It was like a generational movement. People talk about punk rock, but the rave scene in its early days was the biggest youth culture movement in living memory in the UK.
For the first couple of years, much of the music that soundtracked this movement was imported from the US and Europe. Soon enough, people started experimenting, mixing that house and techno with hip-hop drum breaks, soul vocals, and a large injection of reggae sound system culture. The results? Britain's first truly homegrown genres, breakbeat hardcore and jungle. The sound of jungle beats are familiar now, thanks to people like Shy FX. But when early protagonists like the Beat Freak, Ibiza Records and Reinforced crews started pushing this music, it was new and electrifying.
Mr. Cook? Yes? Your son is dead.
DJ Brian G co-founded one of the scene's most revered record labels, V Recordings. He remembers the addition of West Indian flavours to the beats being cooked up.
We in the UK decided to put our vibe into this techno music and add break beats to it. And then suburban areas like Manchester, London and Bristol or whatever, the Jamaican community, we like put our influences into it. And you know, you add like jungle samples and jungle bass lines and all that.
Single-minded people, they can always find a way. Single-minded people, they can always find a way.
MC Navigator first established himself as a mic man on London sound systems in the 80s. Ragga Twins, his spars from Unity High Power, a North London sound system, were early to jump on the new craze sweeping the nation.
Ragga Twins take me to my first rave, and I'm standing in some field in Bedford, you know. I think it was a dance called Energy. It was freezing cold. It's all this ding 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 ding. Now I'm like, what the hell is this? And all these people running around, just all doing all this mad dancing, and people coming up to me and asking me, "Got anything, mate? Can I have a drink of your water, mate?" I did not like it.
Chickaboo, the first woman jungle MC and first openly queer artist in the scene, began her rave journey as a DJ on a Birmingham sound system.
In our local pub, a lot of the kids that used to go to the raves used to meet there first and asked me to play rave tunes and stuff. I started playing it and they would get up and dance and do this kind of like weird raver stuff. It was real vibes.
This is Hooligan 69.
Ragga Twins were like, this is the future. You want to make some money? You better start getting into this. And then around 91, that ragamuffin influence started coming in. It still had the hardcore element, but you could hear the ragga influence coming in.
Burning with ecstasy.
This was a time of intense musical experimentation. Fabio and Groove Rider made a habit of pushing the envelope at their influential residency, Rage at Heaven nightclub, central London. The pair initially played in the small second room, which they quickly outgrew. Ravers loved the tune selection and inventive mixing so much, they were forced to queue down the stairs in the hope of getting in.
We had carte blanche to experiment upstairs. We changed the aesthetic, it got a lot more black. It was everything, like it was youthful and it felt amazing. We was up there mixing Meat Beat Manifesto, Radio Babylon with techno that we were speeding up break beats over. We just noticed that the break beats had a different dynamic on the dance floor. And then when WIE came, was just a transformation because it was everything that we were trying to do with break beats and techno. The tune came along that had it all.
Let me hear you scream. Let me hear you scream.
By now, Storm and Chemistry were budding DJs as well as fully fledged ravers, who, along with their friend and graffiti artist known as Goldie, travelled to 3 events or more every single week, as did thousands of others up and down the country.
We'd start at Rage on a Thursday, dance our backsides off, and then we'd get home and practice all the moves in front of the mirror that we'd seen those night, each of us. Then we go to bed, or we might stay up and just carry on playing music. We go to work, and then we'd all get ready on a Friday night and go up to Coventry to go and hear Doc Scott.
Coventry was one of the first UK cities to allow legal all-night parties. From 1990 until it closed in 94, the Eclipse, later known as The Edge, was a 1,600 capacity former bingo hall that hosted promoters such as Amnesia House and Dance Planet.
We got to meet Top Buzz. We got to see different DJs up there, like we discovered Mickey Finn, Jumping Jack Frost, Brian G.
Sometimes that we travel the whole of the country, down to Plymouth, right up to Leeds, to Scotland, to Carlisle. We went everywhere. And I remember me and Frost went to Belfast. This is when they were blowing up the place. It was a real dangerous place to go, you know, but we just went.
Radio gave me my first schooling on the music. I loved it. Pirate stations pumping 24/7, record shops stocking the latest releases, and DJs and promoters spreading the gospel enabled the scene to expand rapidly. Large-scale raves by Fantasia, Raindance and Spiral Tribe enticed crowds of 20 to 50,000. Clubs like Labyrinth in London, the Sanctuary Milton Keynes and Stearns Worthing all hosted their own nights and attracted passionate followings. Chickaboo.
That level of freedom, I'd only really witnessed that as a religious thing that happens when people are that caught up and free to express themselves. To see people hugging each other, it was very physical and appreciative worship of the music and the collaboration between the DJ and the crowd.
DJ Storm.
Through this music, we were coming together regardless of where you'd come from or how much money you had. And I still think that stands true of drum and bass today, that all comers welcome.
Can't beat the system, go with the flow. Can't beat the system, go with the flow.
Inspired by the originators, Storm, Chemistry and Goldie started carving their own space via early gig bookings as the Mac 3 crew and with radio shows on Defection FM.
Some people would laugh at me and Kemi that we were going to be female DJs, patting us on the head thing, yeah, all right, love, do you know what I mean? And yet there was a lot of encouraging people who were really like, go for it. The first time we saw DJ Rap, we just thought, you know what, if she can do it on her own, us two as a pair, you know, like supporting each other, can do this thing.
DJ Rap was an important first. The first woman to burst through on the male-dominated circuit. She was a groundbreaker. Underground heroes and heroines rose, spearheading huge crossover successes. Artists performing live PAs at both over and under 18s clubs, like where I saw breakbeat hardcore group SL2, found themselves hitting the charts and being invited onto a British TV institution. Top of the Pops.
You're tuned to the world's biggest and best music show. We bring you every kind of music. And when rave meets reggae, you get SL2. Check this out live on a Raggatic.
Now this is a special request to all crew. Once again, SL2 passing through. Hear the lyrical skills in the man like Just Screechy. Hey, hey, body, but what like dying.
Now to a band who were formed by Chris Paul. This is their first single release with Different Strokes. Welcome to Top of the Pops, Isotonic.
Fabio.
We weren't into the commercial aspect at all. A case in point, Isotonic, Different Strokes, right? Which was our friend Chris Paul, which got to number 11 in the charts. And he messaged me and Groove and was like, guys, do you want to come on Top of the Pops? We were like, hell no, I'm not going on Top of the Pops, are you mad? We were just so entrenched in the underground. That's all we cared about. We didn't care about the charts. That's not what we wanted at all. We wanted to be the kings of the underground.
The underground was quick to respond to the fast-moving commercialisation of the music. Chickaboo remembers pioneer DJ and MC trio, Top Buzz, being some of the first artists to strip tunes back to the bare essentials with their classic Living in Darkness.
And that was, for me, a recognisable start in, wait a minute, the music's changing into just bass.
Even before working at DJ Mag, Carl Loban would evangelise about the scene, attending loads of raves, buying vinyl, DJing, and generally talking about it any chance he got. He fondly remembers the music's swift progress.
The music did seem to speed up. That kind of symbiotic relationship of producers giving new tunes to DJs, the DJs playing them out, the producers hearing this new tune, being influenced and then wanting to slightly copy or mimic or adapt or move forward. The rapid extent of the development of music in those early days was just incredible.
The most memorable moment was Amnesia House, where a man got married on stage, got a vicar there, got Groove Rider to be the best man. There was 30,000 people there. But what was so special about that, this glorious day, was an amazing event. Groove went and played somewhere in London and came back 6 o'clock in the morning, and he went to me, Goldie's made this tune, you know, it's called Terminator. And he played Terminator, and I've got to say, my brain couldn't comprehend what was going on. When that time stretch thing started going boom, 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 Groove rewounded it 8 times. Hearing Terminator for the first time, I saw the future. I saw this music has got legs. This is like splitting the atom. This is genius. And to end the day off hearing the birth of Goldie, really. And he changed the way we make music. The time stretching thing that went on to be just a normal thing within music. So for me, that was drum and bass's finest moment.
Goldie had arrived, his mark permanently stamped on the scene he'd become enchanted by just a little while before. The experimentation, expression and jubilation of these early years was a catalyst for change. Those who'd grown up through hardship and a lack of opportunities saw their worlds completely open for the first time, and they shared an optimism that anything was possible. Next time, step inside the visionary record label and club night that would turn this whole scene on its head. A name and a sound that still carries weight today, Metalheads. I'm DJ Flight, and you've been listening to Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass. Subscribe now to get the latest episodes as soon as they drop.
BBC Sounds, music, radio, podcasts.
Drum and bass is everywhere. The fast-beating heart of your workouts, the pure release of your nights out. And it's still breaking new ground. This is the story of how it rose and rose. I'm DJ Flight, and you're listening to Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass. Episode 2, Metalheads.
Things definitely come in cycles, and it does feel like people are now looking back at what was done in the 90s. It was so ahead of its time, it was so like futuristic sounding.
You just heard Nia Archives, a producer, singer-songwriter leading the charge of the current jungle revolution. She's part of a new wave of talent not afraid to delve into our music's magnificent history for inspiration. The 90s were glorious, I remember them well, as does OG-MC Navigator.
1993, jungle was the hottest music in this whole country. Jungle was coming out of your cars, it was coming out of your neighbor's window, it was on the radio, it was in the shops, it was on the buses, it was everywhere.
Midland's hero, DJ and label runner Doc Scott.
There were things being done in the 90s for the first time because technology allowed it. It was like a once-in-a-lifetime period, and then you had all these guys coming up that were hungry.
By 1993, the music was restless, evolving at lightning speed. The tempo was increasing, the sound getting deeper and darker. Nights like Rage and Roast in London were right at the vanguard as new styles emerged. Navigator, an artist with deep roots in UK reggae, loved the mixture.
Sound system, hip-hop, rare groove, soul, all mixed together with breakbeat and techno, and reshaped, repackaged and pushed out as a London sound.
A huge name in D&B from 99 onwards and still hot right now, a young DJ Fresh was also around in the mid-90s, listening and learning.
I was a kid of the motorway rave era, but like my older friends were going to those raves and they would bring back tapes. I was just like, what is this alien world that I can hear through my headphones?
31 seconds.
Cassettes and tape packs were vital in helping the music spread far and wide. Somewhat cheaper than buying loads of individual 12-inches, they were also a great promotion tool for DJs and MCs trying to make a name for themselves. MC Chickaboo cemented her rep after linking with fellow Brummie, DJ G.E. Real, playing a slew of the biggest raves of the time and gracing many a tape pack.
We used to sell tape packs basically outside the parties and stuff. That's what people put on when they were driving home. So it's really nice to be remembered by that generation of ravers. And of course, at the time, had no clue or any idea or any intention of what we were doing. It was just a project of love. We all sort of fell in love with the culture.
Local scenes flourished, adding their own flavour to the melting pot of influences. Few could claim to be quite as influential as Bristol. A rich cultural and musical heritage spawned numerous crews, nights and labels, including the respected Roughneck Ting and Full Cycle. Honor-Lee, singer-songwriter and frontwoman of Represent.
We always had this tradition in Bristol of raving in fields. The music was dance, techno. There was a lot of reggae influence, and the combination of those two cultures was what really progressed the music of that day, and drum and bass came out of that.
Originally from the nearby city of Gloucester, Brian G became taken with the Bristol scene after getting his hands on a demo featuring some of its most promising talents: Ronnie Size, Crust, Suv and DJ Die. They ended up becoming the basis of his and Jumping Jack Frost's brand new label, the esteemed V Recordings.
Me and Frost went and met Ronnie and Cross, and they were just cool, you know, two rastas, crazy, wild dreadlocks and stuff, you know, young, rebel kind of like vibes and hungry and all that, you get what I'm saying? And like, their jungle was different, a bit more soulful, like more groovy. Die was just like the coolest white dude that you could ever meet, you get what I'm saying, you know? So brought that quirkiness to it. So you had these four guys making some of the greatest music at that time in the UK. It was just blowing my mind. It was just the best times ever for me, for the label V. We thought we were the hottest boys in town.
An illustration of the ever-evolving nature of the music, the dancehall influence began to take centre stage. Ragga Jungle grew so popular that record distribution companies released numerous compilations, and artists broke through to the mainstream, essentially converting another set of young music fans.
Top of the Pops 2, BBC 2, Saturday at 5:15. Now we've got M-Beat and General Levy. First jungle on Top of the Pops ever. This is incredible.
One of the leading lights in the big room stadium sound, producer DJ Subfocus cites his earliest jungle memory as being when he first heard the incredible sounds of M-Beat.
When I was at school, a friend of mine put on a cassette tape of the Jungle compilation. The first track was Incredible by M-Beat and General Levy. And it just sounded so mental compared to anything else I'd heard before, and it instantly really excited me.
DJ Fresh.
I feel like there was a social change going on in the UK at that point, and people from different backgrounds and jobs were meeting up and realising that we all had so much in common through the music, where previously there were so many social barriers, I think, in the UK.
Despite the successes and the overall vibe of peace, love, unity and respect, you could feel a backlash. Some media outlets stopped covering the movement. Others went as far as running stories about apparent widespread violence. It became impossible to ignore the racial bias behind some of these stories. Storm.
The press was starting to use this term, jungle bunnies, which was really disgusting to us. You know, and then somebody got stabbed at Laserdrome. All of a sudden there seemed to be this bad element to what was going on because drum and bass people were really there for the music.
When negative stories started popping up in the press, it was as if Jungle suddenly had a PR problem. Despite the fact the Vibes had always been proudly inclusive, vibrant, diverse. Or for the most part, anyway. MC Navigator.
But there was also a big contingency in our scene that were very racist. There was a meeting where heads sat down, tried to thrash it all out, and there was a big split. They couldn't see eye to eye. And there were certain promoters that were saying, if you play Ragga Jungle in my dance, I'm not going to book you anymore.
I think the press really kind of stopped us from using the word jungle, the government. I don't think they could get a handle on it. I mean, even when you'd see like illegal raves, you know, the police would be there telling you not to go in. But what could they do with these thousands of people all having a nice time and really enjoying themselves and coming out and going, all right, mate, you're right, yeah.
For me, it was a bit strange, but it was necessary for the music to move forward. The ragamuffin side of jungle got tarnished and painted with a brush that wasn't necessarily fair. That's when drum and bass took over.
I know that all of you shall weakness the day as bad man shall fall.
Aged 17, being told the music I loved, jungle, was over and it's all about drum and bass now, really hurt. The media backlash succeeded in swaying opinions. But from opposition and negativity, something amazing can grow. It was at this time that one of the most cutting-edge platforms was founded. Following a profound experience seeing icons Fabio and Groove Rider in '91, Goldie envisioned a family-like record label, club night and merchandise range for himself, Chemistry and Storm to run.
Come to me in those open arms is where I want to be.
So we came back from Rage. It was going, oh, I want to make this music. You two are going to DJ it. We're going to have a club. We're going to have a label. He just went on that mission. I mean, when we first heard Tear Off Your Chest by Dillinger, he was like, right, I've got to find this guy. I've got to hunt him down.
Metalheads was born in August 1994, named by Groove Rider after the metal dubplates which DJs used to test exclusive tunes before release. Goldie wanted his label to be a home for explorative and imaginative beats, which is what it was, beginning with the very first release, a split 12-inch single from Goldie and Doc Scott.
Goldie had always spoke about starting a label, said it'd be cool, you know, if we were to come together on the first release, and they were very much sought after. To be on one side of 001 of Metalheads, arguably one of the most important drum and bass labels of all time, is still mind-blowing, beyond humbling.
A number of groundbreaking releases followed in quick succession.
Goldie put the first few releases out, Pesce, Wax Doctor, Alex Reese.
But before long, bigger record labels came knocking, wanting to sign Goldie for a proper debut album release.
Then he got signed by London Record for Timeless and realised he couldn't have the time to concentrate on the label, so he handed it over to us. For us, it was a very exciting start because our first release was J Magic Your Sound, and obviously Angels Fell from Dillinger, so we had a double header release. What those two releases did was made everybody look at Metalheads, and not long after that we were offered 5 weeks at Blue Note, this underground club where you were invited to play.
Metalheads at Blue Note quickly became a hotbed of innovation. Doc Scott.
Blue Note was just kind of a sanctuary to experiment. That's how I remember it. Stuff that sometimes I just didn't feel confident enough to play on a Friday or a Saturday night out. But on a Sunday, I was like, okay, I can play this thing that was like, sounded weird. And then lo and behold, 6 months later, people are queuing around the corner, one in, one out, queuing to get in just for half an hour at the end. It was bonkers.
The capacity was so small because it was a restaurant upstairs, so I think it was 260, 270. And, you know, at nights we'd get 1,000 people downstairs. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. All those things we wanted to do, we've got the label, we've got the club. We are the DJs playing what Goldie is making. Yeah, we lived that dream for years, right? And it was fantastic.
Metalheads at Blue Note was everything to me. It's hard to explain just how exciting, educational and enriching those nights were. They were truly incredible. I still carry its DNA in my DJ sets today. Another enormously significant club night during this period was Speed at the Mars Bar in London's West End. Run by proper heavyweights of the scene, LTJ Bookham, Fabio and Sarah Sandy of Groove Connection DJ Agency, the night was key to the burgeoning deep, atmospheric jazz-funk sounds. Fabio remembers the disillusionment that motivated him and Bookham to launch Speed.
Tick, 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 tick.
I found myself in the mid-90s really navigating towards that cosmic style where they were sampling Lonnie Liston and Jeff Lorber and stuff like that. I'd never forget a real turning point was when me and Bookham played at Paradise Club. And when I say we cleared this dance, mate, it was like someone had come in there and gone, fire! And everyone ran out. And I remember Danny saying to me, we need to do our own night. We just need to do something small where we can play our music because there's some amazing tunes being made and just no one's getting it. And so we started up Speed. I felt so privileged after Rage to find something. We had all this amazing music, man, and in this tiny little club, and everyone was telling us it weren't going to work, and you pull it off. And that feeling is so satisfying.
Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings.
In the next episode, D&B truly pops. Major label signings, momentous industry awards, and the music media comes sniffing again. I'm DJ Flight, and you've been listening to Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass. Hit subscribe now to get the latest episodes as soon as they drop.
Whatever you're up to, take a Radio 1 podcast with you. BBC Sounds, music, radio, podcasts.
A quick warning, this episode features strong language. Drum and bass is everywhere. The fast-beating heart of your workouts, the pure release of your nights out. And it's still breaking new ground. This is the story of how it rose and rose. I'm DJ Flight, and you're listening to Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass. Episode 3, D&B Pops. It's the mid-90s, and up to now, jungle D&B has mostly been an underground thing, celebrated in dark, sweaty nightclubs. The mainstream press coverage in the UK had dismissed, racialised, and tried to shut down the movement.
When you can't see the angles no more, you're in trouble.
There had, of course, always been a wealth of pirate stations booming the music, but they sometimes came with their own politics and drama. MC Navigator went through a rough patch after Ragga Jungle was almost written off.
I'd left Cool FM under very hard circumstances, a lot of bad stigma floating around. I had to go back and go do a 9-to-5 job. I went from doing 6-7 bookings a weekend to 0. I felt disenchanted. And to get the call, we want you to come and do an audition for Radio 1. I was like, wow.
One in the Jungle Showcase on 97 to 99 FM in stereo. That's right, massive jungle nationwide across the UK with a guy called Gerald rinsing out the rhythms of 95 alongside myself, MC Navigator, as we rock it up.
The 1995 launch of BBC Radio 1's One in the Jungle show was a milestone moment in the recognition of this scene. DJ Storm, co-founder of Metalheads.
One in the Jungle was really exciting. We're being accepted by this big corporation that doesn't always accept everything. And it took them some time, but they got there in the end.
We're on national radio now.
In Radio 1, D&B found a home above board. The pillars of the scene were all present, spreading the word to new and old ears, suddenly legitimised. One in the Jungle, alongside the release of Goldie's album, Timeless, seemed to signify a tipping point. Timeless was the first million-selling drum and bass record, and, more importantly, it was a masterpiece. Fans and critics alike loved it. They also loved Goldie.
He was charismatic. He looked different. People loved to do the whole sit him in a chair and chain him up and, the gold teeth.
Timeless was the first sign that D&B might be marketable, that this underground culture might shift some real units. Something changed. DJ Mag's Carl Loban.
In the wake of the success of Goldie and the Timeless album, it seemed like there was a plethora of major labels looking to scoop up the next big drum and bass star, and pretty much every major seemed to sign their own artists. Lemon D and Dillinger was signed, and Photech and Source Direct by Virgin, and Ronnie Size Represent through a subsidiary of Mercury Records.
At this same time, over in Bristol, a new spin on D&B had been taking shape.
Once we heard the Bristol sound, it was so exciting because you were like, oh my God, what are they going to do with the bass line this time?
The very forefront of the Bristol scene was Ronnie Size and his band, Represent. I saw Represent play live quite early on at Essential Festival in North London. An incredible show. Even the way they entered the stage was different. It felt totally fresh. Honor Lee was Represent's songwriter and frontwoman.
At the beginning, I think they wanted to keep this little mysterious vibe. So they'd come out with their hoods up, and obviously the crowd are like, oh, what's going on? And then they'd start playing some notes on their keyboards, and then the drums would start, the bass would start. It was just electric, And I just remember there being a lot of love and always being surprised. How did this many people know about us?
Brian G, label runner at V Recordings, put out some of Ronnie Size's earliest releases, but Represent was something else.
I don't think I've been excited by a live drum and bass act as much as Represent, and there's been quite a few, and they're good, but when Represent was on form and you started to hear Honor Lee singing, and when you heard them live, oh my God.
It was one of those intuitive combinations, one of those really magical relationships that you can only really hope for once in a lifetime.
Melodic, logic, ties, limericks to raw forms to form new forms of mood for you to root on into millennium. Live swing like pendulum, pure soul maximum.
Ronnie Size and Represent were always destined to grow bigger. For their debut album, they signed to a major label offshoot called Talking Loud. Even their old boss at V Recordings couldn't begrudge them that.
What Talking Loud did, we could have never have done for them. The investment that Talking Loud put into making Represent, and what Represent managed to go on and do.
If Goldie gave drum and bass its first classic album in '95 with Timeless, Ronnie and Represent gave the music its second. Fittingly, the album was called New Forms.
I remember the Mercury Music Award night. I remember not knowing what it was, never heard of it, because I wasn't in music for any reason apart from I sang. I wrote poetry from a very early age. So, when someone said, oh, we've been nominated for this prize, I'm like, oh, great. I mean, I was there literally for the free dinner. People were interviewing us saying, who do you think is going to win? And I was just flippantly just having a laugh and saying, we are,
Welcome to the 6th Annual Mercury Music Prize.
D&B at the UK's most esteemed music award, the genre's founding father, Fabio, remembers it as a very big deal.
They were up against Spice World. Spice Girls were so big. But I think the category at that time was one of the most difficult in the history of the Mercury Music Award because there were some great albums.
I'd like to see Beth Orton win it. I guess the winner will have R at the start of the name, probably Ronnie Size.
I'm thinking it'll be Radiohead, but the time for speculation is over because now we join Chairman of the Judges Simon Frith down in the Great Room where he's about to announce the winner of this year's Mercury Music Prize.
Apologies if I'm rather hoarse. We've been arguing for rather a long time. And at the end of the argument, we came down to 2 records. We do think that Radiohead's OK Computer is a classic record. In the end, we were agreed that the winner of the 1997 Mercury Music Prize is Ronnie Size with Represent.
And I was just cheering in the front room. I was so happy for them because they fully deserved it as well.
Million-selling records, prestigious awards, international tours. All of this demonstrated that this genre was legitimate. After One in the Jungle's 2-season run came to an end in '97, the Radio 1 mantle was handed over to Fabio and Groove Rider for a new D&B show in early '98.
We had carte blanche to do what we wanted, and we moved from doing 4 till 6 to doing 10 till 12, which was prime time. It was a massive part of our lives.
I don't know about you, but I love that beat.
Yeah, that's a bad tune, man.
Actually really got it together on that one, trust me.
Got all the elements right on that. It's a nice tune, man.
As I said before, free form and a tune entitled Space.
Fabio and Groove Rider's role at this time was crucial. They brought drum and bass to a whole new generation. The whole scene felt the benefit of this new legitimacy. It was a blessing for many people, including Manchester legend MC DRS. Everything changed when he linked up with LTJ Bookham, whose own star had quickly ascended.
I literally went from MCing a club with 50 people in to like being a resident at Cream overnight. The first thing I ever did was an American tour. So he was like, oh, do you want to be an MC? Yeah. Oh, we got a passport? Yeah. Oh, we're going on a month tour like next week.
V Recordings Brian G.
America was getting excited about drum and bass, and we even managed to get a deal in America with a company called Ultra Music. And we had a residency at a club called Twilo. It's one of the biggest clubs in New York. So we were big dogs at that time there, right? There was so much more people from all different genres just wanting to get to know drum and bass. All stars and influential people, Jamie Foxx and all these people turning up because it was like the new thing.
For those who'd been there since the start, there was something quite novel about this newfound success. Fabio.
We went from this, we are struggling to buy 3-4 records, to weddings where man's turning up driving Ferraris. Photech got married, and I remember in the car park, there was a Lamborghini, 2 Ferraris, a Rolls Royce, and they were all owned by my mates. You know, a Porsche Carrera. And I was just thinking, these are all my mates' cars. It was mind-blowing. That was a moment where I sat down and thought, we've made it. We've actually come from like nothing. Me and Groove having to buy a Ford Capri for 90 quid and saving up and giving out our own flyers, to everyone rocking up in Ferraris.
The thing about those fancy cars, though, they came at a cost.
In Chalice, because this was record company money, a lot of it. And they kind of bought the scene out. Looking back, the saddest thing about that was it's been happening since the 60s. They were kind of like, we don't get it, but it's cool, so we're going to buy it. But you can't look back, apart from maybe Goldie, and say that it worked with any of the artists, because none of them made classics when they were signed. It was like they were signed to do remixes for all their failing pop artists.
With all that money flying about, it wasn't just the music that suffered. The relationships at the heart of D&B became strained too. MC DRS's collaboration with LTJ Bookham was to be fruitful, but short-lived.
People went from 500 white labels doing a few raves in the UK literally overnight to being millionaires, and like all these commitments and tours and licensing deals in different areas and so much crazy stuff. That's what I said to Bookham. The whole situation came to a sticky end, but I told him a while ago, I'm not mad at you. If I was 20 odd and trying to handle a millions of pound industry, you know, I don't hold nothing against these people. You know, we're young black men, not trained in business, just out here trying to do a thing. So I spent a lot of years sort of pointing fingers and being bitter, but when I think about it, he did the best he could. That's it.
Whatever else was going on in the scene, one relationship that stayed tight throughout was DJ Storm and Chemistry. In the midst of this huge D&B boom, they continued to thrive.
We were in Miami and Ego said, these guys are here from Germany. They've been trying to get hold of you for 2 years to do this mix for them.
That mix was for K7's now legendary DJ Kicks series.
We were like, okay. And we actually were going to be able to give our guys actual money for their tunes, which was, again, a whole different concept at that point. Money wasn't always easy to come by in the drum and bass scene making tunes. With underground labels, you know, it was hard to survive.
Now, Storm and Chemistry's DJ Kicks mix was huge, really huge.
When we got to Hamburg, there were life-size Chemistry and Storms on the lamppost. Kemi was like, oh no, oh God, we've made it. Look, we're on all the lampposts.
The duo toured all over the world. Japan, Australia, New Zealand, the States. It felt like a victory lap, but they returned in a strange mood.
I mean, we'd literally just got back from the America tour. Both of us had had this weird feeling. I mean, Kemi came out of the toilet and we both said it together, someone's going to die. And it was really odd. And Goldie was doing this mad kind of snowboarding. They were dropping him out of a helicopter onto these kind of really mad pistes. So we thought, oh my God, we hope Goldie is okay. Coming home on the plane, I was sick nearly all the way home, to the point that Kemi got annoyed with me because I had to keep coming out. She didn't like flying. In the end, I sat at the back of the plane, and I think it's the first row me and Kemi ever had when we came off the plane, and she was like, well, I'm getting in the cab and you'll just have to go on your own. I said, okay, fine, and we both stomped off. We didn't speak all that night, and then I got a message on my home phone answer machine saying, hi, it's your shit mate here, I don't know what happened, but give me a call, yeah? And then I called her back, yeah, it's the other shit half of Chemistry and Storm, don't know what happened. And I said, we're obviously feeling something. So anyway, I go to her house, and I mean, we were exhausted. It was literally the next day. But we knew these guys in Southampton had been trying to book us for 2 years, and, you know, Chemistry and Storm were always going to turn up.
Cancelling a show was never on the cards for Storm and Chemistry.
We were talking on the way down there. Kemi said, I'm still feeling someone's going to die. And I was saying, yeah, me too. We heard that Goldie was okay.
Another successful gig with appreciative ravers done. Chemistry and Storm began the drive home.
We're behind this van, and it makes a little bit of a mistake going off the motorway and coming. And we're laughing because, oh, look at the mad van. Do you know what I mean? You always see mad van drivers. I said, I better move out. And then obviously I saw something out of the corner of my eye, and the next minute I realised Kemi's head's down now and she's covered in glass. I realise now she's not talking. People can say whatever they want about this, whether I've created in my mind. I felt her go, and I saw her like a film, like Ghost or something, look back at herself, and she just went, yeah, I'm not into that. And the car door opened and it closed all on its own. And that's not a word of a lie. Her pulse was gone then. And then the ambulance turned up. So they tried to do something, but I kind of knew at that point that she was gone.
It was April 25th, 1999. It felt incomprehensible that Chemistry had gone. News of her death brought the whole scene together in grief. Doc Scott.
When I got that call, that call was the first time I'd been gut punched like that. I'd never experienced that ultimate sadness, man. Do you know what I mean? Because of all the people to leave too early, she was like the sweetest, nicest person.
Carl Loban.
Loved by everybody, really, and just the most beautiful soul, and it was really tragic.
I still feel the loss of Chemistry all these years later. She was so kind and supportive when I first started my journey as DJ Flight back in '97. I probably wouldn't have even started if it wasn't for Kemi's presence. We were on the edge of a new millennium, but missing one of the scene's most vibrant champions. This was a genre that always kept moving. In fact, momentum kept it alive. So what was the next move? You've been listening to Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass with me, DJ Flight. Hit subscribe now to get the latest episodes as soon as they drop.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Drum and bass is everywhere. The fast beating heart of your workouts, the pure release of your nights out. And it's still breaking new ground. This is the story of how it rose and rose. I'm DJ Flight, and you're listening to Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass, episode 4, Rebirth. Drum and bass arrived in the new millennium without Chemistry, one of the purest champions of this music from the very start. DJ Storm, her best friend and constant partner behind the decks, had to figure out how to move forwards without her, if she even wanted to carry on.
The weirdest thing for me and Kemi is that we shared a set of records and we never played each other's tunes. So now I suppose that first gig back at Bar Rumba, I've got to play her set pretty much, which was a bit off key.
At Bar Rumba, a central London venue that would become a focal point for drum and bass into the 2000s, Storm had her first experience of being in the booth, alone, although she wasn't, really.
I mean, everybody was fantastic. The whole of my agency turned up, and they're all behind me in the box, and I just almost fell to pieces, but luckily, Brian G told me about Nine Night and how you do it in Jamaica and how you celebrate people. And to add to the whole thing of Kemi passing, she didn't want to be old, she wanted to be notorious, and she always thought she'd die young.
I was there that night, sometime in July '99. I can remember the atmosphere, a sense of grief, a little tension too, people hoping Storm would do well. But more than anything, it was a celebration of Chemistry's career, her passion, of the whole scene. It was the way Kemi would have wanted.
That night I did celebrate what we'd achieved. And a lot of people said to me, oh, you're going to come back? And I was like, oh my God, if I didn't, I think Kemi would actually come and haunt me, you know, like every night, like be a poltergeist or something, because we worked hard to get where we were. The beauty of Kemi finding this music was, for the first time in her life, she was accepted just for who she was. And I think she embraced it. I saw Kemi blossom from someone who was quite shy and introvert. And I mean, she loved people in this scene. So yeah, Brian giving me that good talking to, making me think of all about the fun times me and Kemi had together, made me just, okay, this is it. You make or break right now. And you know, you've got lots of people behind you in case you falter, and they can just step in.
Only knows how you make me feel.
Storm and Chemistry were very instrumental in my own rise as a DJ. I idolised them. I remember giving them copies of my very first mixtapes in the hope of getting some advice and being seen. One night back in late 98, early 99 at Swerve, Fabio's weekly soulful event in central London, they'd asked me for a new tape as they wanted to bring another woman into Metalheads. That cassette was passed on to Goldie.
It was interesting with you and your tape because we didn't tell Goldie you were a girl, right? Because we didn't say that to people when we first started. We said, we've got this tape from this DJ, you need to hear it. Listen what this DJ's doing to B-sides. And he listened and he was like, yeah, okay.
Chemistry may not have been present physically to see my first set at Heads, but I felt her, and she's never far away from my thoughts. I know the same is true for so many others.
One of my favourite drum and bass acts when I first got into the music were Chemistry and Storm, and travelled to Bristol to see them play. That was kind of a big deal for me.
Producer and DJ High Contrast. Like me, when he was starting out, he made a habit of seeing the duo whenever he could.
I actually bumped into them in the hallway of Emporium in Cardiff and was kind of starstruck. They were really nice, and I said, I'm producing tunes, I would love to get you some music, and they were very encouraging, and so that was always like a goal of mine. Sadly, Kemi passed away not long afterwards, which was a huge blow to the whole scene and everyone who knew her. I feel like they're such important figures, in general, but like for me personally, yeah, they've been musical heroes.
In the new millennium, High Contrast would become massive. He was part of an exciting wave of new energy entering the scene. Original heavyweight Fabio thought new blood was exactly what was needed for the noughties.
From about 96, 97, the music then went a little bit wayward. It kind of lost its spark because all the big artists were signed. They weren't really doing what they wanted to do.
In the middle of this existential moment for the music, something new arrived.
Strangely enough, off the back of that came garage. And then garage became an underground force. And it became a real kind of like, drum and bass has got really boring now. We want something new. I remember speaking to Brian G and we were like, I don't know how much longer drum and bass is going to last. Women weren't going out as much anymore. Crowds were kind of like, it was a lot of guys stroking their chins.
While D&B had only been getting darker and colder, UKG was slower, smoother, and viewed as sexier. It had more songs.
So I was kind of a little bit, what happens now? And then Calibre happens. Calibre changed everything for me. I've met him and he changed my life.
We arrived at a period of time in drum and bass wherein all of the major dance magazines were printing articles about the death of drum and bass, which in retrospect made me think like how stupid journalism is, because you can't rub out genre. Like once there's a form in the universe, it's gonna persevere, regardless of whether you like it or not.
Calibre is much loved and still one of D&B's most prolific producers. When he first exploded onto the scene, it felt like he'd come from nowhere. But he'd been experimenting with different ways of making music for years. Back home in Northern Ireland, something just shifted when he heard D&B.
It would have been mid to early 90s. There were shops in Belfast that were stocking it, and my brother brought it home, and the first reaction to it was, I thought, this is all loads of drums. I didn't really get the bass part of it until I actually started to go to the clubs, and then I could hear it there, and I guess that's a bit more of an epiphanal experience then, where you get a picture of how it's supposed to work. And so it's like this spectrum of bass and percussive angles that really interested me, because I was trying to write music for years before, and I was mostly trying to make techno and 130 break beats sort of stuff. And so when drum and bass came along, and because I was a drummer as well, it seemed to be a whole world of possibilities.
For Calibre, drum and bass was the sound of different cultures and people meeting in the most exciting way.
When I came to London for the first time, when I went to Music House and Velvet Rooms and Charing Cross, and all these sort of fundamental first experiences seemed to confirm what I felt about the music, that it was this convergence of ideas and cultures and people.
The openness of this culture most appealed to him, which maybe explains why he felt free to put his own different spin on the music. Calibre tunes were more melodic and soulful than a lot of the stuff about at the time.
I loved writing stuff in a more musical tip because it felt like as if you could tell a story somehow. But I remember I was living with my parents at the time, and I was listening to Radio 1, and Fabio told me that he was going to play the tune on radio, and I was just a wee fella from Belfast, you know. It's such a precious period, I think.
As I said before, I kicked off the show with Calibre and a track entitled Feeling, forthcoming creative source from a marvellous EP that we're going to be bringing out in a little while. So watch out for this man, Calibre.
Appreciation ran both ways. Fabio did give Calibre his first big break, but Calibre also completely revitalised the whole movement for Fabio.
I've been really lucky in every time where it looks like a door's closed. I found something to drag me out of the doom and gloom and thinking, of what do I do now? And then 2001 was the Liquid Funk era.
Liquid Funk, coined by Fabio himself, was exactly what it sounds like. Loose, dreamy, soulful. DJ Mag's Carl Loban.
Perhaps coming out into this new century, there was a bit more positivity in outlook. This seemed to bring forward a whole new kind of like subgenre, the liquid funk thing that Fabio had kind of developed as his lane at the time. Produced like Calibre, Marcus Intellects doing more soulful stuff, and the birth of Hospital Records brought some of the happy, soulful side of the sound to the fore.
Liquid Funk connected with audiences and creators further and further afield. Before he knew it, Brian G, creator of V Recordings and the legendary Movement Party, thrown on Thursday nights at Bar Rumba, found himself cutting deals with Brazilian artists like DJ Marky.
We brought him back to London and we made him play at Bar Rumba. I knew once people saw him, their reaction would be like, just like mind blown away. And people were. The first night at Bar Rumba, he blew up the place, man.
D&B had always been about the meeting point of different cultures, but crucially, this was something new at a time when the genre could have flatlined.
With the Brazilian thing coming through, it just opened up the whole Latin world. It's a big world, you get what I'm saying?
Throughout this whole time, Fabio and Groove Rider's Radio 1 show was a constant presence, guiding the scene through its expansion.
It was blowing things up differently. We were getting letters from Dominican Republic, South Africa, all over the world, people listening into the shows. It felt so universal. I know people that used to send tapes of our radio shows to America and Canada and places like that. It's not like now where you've got the internet, you can listen to anything from around the world. You couldn't. It felt like we'd landed and we were here and we were missionaries. We were getting tunes from everywhere because it was such a big thing.
Back home, a host of new talent embodied the optimism of the 21st century, but Storm also saw something nostalgic about the new wave.
To me, Photek was a 21st century junglist, and Calibre a junglist. And I say that because of the bass, to a certain extent. And I mean, Calibre was straight away, you could see this guy had got something. And High Contrast just came quite full force, I feel.
Even High Contrast, an artist who would find his share of mainstream success over the next decade, he felt that OG jungle influence too.
When I got into drum and bass, it was very techie sounding, in that period around 97, 98. A lot of jump up. I quite like the jump up, but I was really looking for the kind of more soulful sounds and the kind of housey vocals that you would hear in early jungle, an era that I had missed out on, but I was finding out about through crate digging. But I was like, where are these vocals and, you know, nice pads and chords and things. Fabio and Groove Rider's show on Radio 1 was really just fundamental to me. I had to listen to it every week and started to hear Fabio talking about, as you say, liquid funk, and Groove Rider pushing the kind of future funk angle. So it was really exciting to start hearing these more melodic, soulful sounds coming through. When I heard How You Make Me Feel by Marcus Intelax and SD Files and the early Calibre tunes, it was just such a magical moment, because I felt like, wow, I'm on the right track. There's other people doing this and they're having real success, making a mark in this scene with this kind of sound that was actually getting quite a bit of pushback from my perspective. When I was trying to play more soulful sounds, I'd have people coming up to me being like, why aren't you playing, you know, these heavy Dillinger tunes?
The old guard was adapting to welcome in the new sound as well. Shy FX had released banger after banger for almost a decade already, but Shake Your Body, a 2001 collaboration with T-Power and Die, made them household names in 2002 when it hit number 7 on the UK singles chart.
Well, I was so excited because he was on top of the pops. But it was so brilliant, right? And we were dancing around the room and we were so excited. Because actually now it sounded pretty good because our tellies had moved on. We got some bass. You could have surround sound then. So now you were almost able to understand it now. It was a great tune, right? And one that, of course, you could all sing along to.
All movements need their anthems. Shake Your Body is undeniably that. Others, like Shimon and Andy C's Body Rock, which charted at number 28 the previous year, all contributed to a renewed lease of life for the genre that some love to claim had already died. 2002 brought about another victory.
This is One Extra.
BBC Radio 1 Extra, a brand new digital station launched with a dedicated 11 hours of drum and bass every week. It felt like a true acknowledgement of the scene's staying power.
Well, I think it was always exciting, right, to anything that's a little bit more overground, because then you obviously get to more people, and that's always what we wanted, do you know what I mean? I don't think drum and bass will ever be what you'd call completely mainstream. There are certain acts, but I think it was a good stepping stone to that, and then to highlight some different people that maybe you haven't ever heard on the radio before. So that was, I mean, it was a joy, really, One Extra, and I mean, it obviously gave you a chance to get on the radio.
Gave me my second big break. It was a huge learning curve and a really amazing experience, but we'll talk about more of that in the next episode.
Yo, One Extra Massive, DJ Flight, the next chapter. Deal with the matter, deal with it proper, rinse it out.
You've been listening to Turn It Up, a short history of drum and bass with me, DJ Flight. Hit subscribe to get new episodes as soon as they drop.